net it's still growing, and I'm frankly really surprised that like 120 companies in a city of this size, all over the place in terms of what they're doing too. So it's a great community to be part of. So that's what we're trying to do, is trying to show some respect for Austin and blockchain. So basic membership, members of the collective is any company which has a presence here in Austin, and it's free. So our business model is to lose lots and lots of money. No, our business model is to try and survive by some wonderful folks who are visionary and have got some money or have got some time and effort and who provide it to us. So this is our patrons and supporters slide. Quick shout out at first for Capital Factory, because they not only provide space for our meetup and about 5 or 6 other meetups, they have actually just agreed to provide the collective with sort of ongoing space so that we can actually call downtown location our home. So we'll be hanging around here quite a bit. But there's few names on the slide that you recognise that we enjoy financial support from or in-kind support from, and we're most welcome for their encouragement and practical input, if you like. Meetups. We run this meetup every single month on the 3rd Monday of every month without fail. I usually MC it unless I'm away, in which case Joshua might MC it or one of the other associate directors. But pretty much without fail, 3rd Monday of every month. Next Monday, we've actually got a presentation by IBM. For those who come here a lot, you'll remember that we had a presentation by IBM about 3 months ago. That was a very technical one about the latest version of IBM blockchain based on Fabric. This presentation is actually about all the things that IBM do for startups. And it will be a bit about Fabric, but a bit about also the services they offer and the programs they offer and all that kind of thing. So it's very much startup oriented. Say meet every 3rd Monday of the month. Over the summer, we're running a few happy hours, which are all about drinking and chatting. And we ran one in June 1st, over on the east side. Had a group of people there. I think they enjoyed it. And we're going to run a second one in South Austin this time on July 1st. So that's the first Monday of the month. We're going to be at a place called Cosmic Coffee, which is a great, it does coffee, it does beer, it does wine, it does cocktails, it's got food trucks, great place owned by an old friend of mine. How many long-time Austiners in the audience? So there used to be a great music venue downtown called Momo's, and the guy who owned Momo's now owns Cosmic Coffee, so is doing a great success of it. So those 2 dates, July 15th, before that July 1, are the dates to have in your diary. Okay, on to tonight. In a moment, I'm going to ask for any shout outs from the audience, just anyone who's got something to say, something to ask, some help needed. Help can be provided. And then we've got an introduction presentation from Ron Resnick of Enterprise Ethereum. He is actually going to be talking about token standards and the need for them, not specific to Ethereum. And then after Ron, we're going to have Courtney Brock talking on the subject of non-fungible tokens. If you don't know what they are, then you will know what they are. And at the end of the evening, we'll do some further networking. We'll get out of here by 9. And if you want to come and have a drink downstairs, it's a decent enough bar. That's it from me, I think, before we do the presentation. So let's do some shout outs. Who has got something to say about anything? You?
I do.
You do? Well, let's start with you.
Should I use the microphone?
Yeah, definitely use the microphone.
I host a local meetup called KinCoin Austin. Kin is a project that rewards users and developers in a digital ecosystem of apps. You may have heard about Kin recently. The SEC filed suit against Kick Interactive for what they're going to file for. But if you come see me after the meetup, I'll give you some contact information. We can talk about it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Don't bring any subpoenas with you. Any more shout outs? There usually are a few. I might put some. Richard, haven't seen you at a. What is Lily Pond?
Well, that's an autism platform.
So you need to tell what's Lily Pond.
Well, LilyPond is an autism platform that we're building right now, but that's as much as I can say about it. But more importantly, Google have very kindly hosted us on the 28th of July, no, the 6th of September. So a big crowd of special needs kids are going to give a music concert at Google. Cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, everything. Yeah, the Fiberspace. So it's going to be a fantastic event. We've done it there twice before, and this is our third time. And we'll also be at the Thinkery. The kiddos will be at the Thinkery on Sunday morning, the 28th of July.
If you tweet about that and add #Austin blockchain, I retweet it, you know.
Thank you.
Good. Anyone else for anything? I haven't seen you here for a while. What's going on in are you still in the government?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, what's going on in the government?
I just got back from 2 weeks in Estonia, and about 2 weeks in Estonia. So we were discussing various ledger technologies over there that they've employed on voting and other e-citizen type activities over there too. So, yeah, some good stuff.
Can you come and do a presentation about that someday? Or do
Cleared for that.
you can get clearance? Come on. All sorts of people get clearance in the current government. Okay. Oh, after you.
I just wanted to add that Richard is an awesome piano teacher, especially for my son Luke. Hey, how you doing?
He is, isn't he? We've got a few musicians actually in the room. So, okay. We usually have far more shout outs. I'll do a quick shout out, not for me, but does anyone realise? So there's a big supercomputing event going on right now, and every year they award kind of a ranking for the fastest supercomputers in the world. And there's one just up the road in northwest Austin at TAC, and it's just been voted number 5 in the world. So they could definitely mine some Bitcoin with that, can't they? Good. Anyone else for anyone else, or shall I get Ron up here to talk about token standardization? Oh, Chris, hey, how you doing?
This is just a factoid.
Well, a factoid.
Somebody did a summary and they figured out that mining a Bitcoin qualifies it as a small nation. It's carbon output.
All right. Probably does. It's like Ireland, really, isn't it, or something? Yeah. Denmark. Okay. Any more? Okay, I'm going to get Ron's slides up and give him the floor, as it were. So Ron is going to present for 20-ish minutes, and he's going to keep the time. And he says, trying to work this. Window, tools, view. It's everything's different. And he'll do some Q&A too. And then Courtney will present about non-fungible tokens. I love saying that phrase. Okay, over to you, Ron. Use the microphone.
Just push that?
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of music, I play in a band in town. One of our bands is called the Beatcoins, and we have 2 blockchain songs, Satoshi Blues and another one. So what was it, if you look up Beatcoin, we're on YouTube. What was your search? Beatcoins and blockchain? Yeah, you'll find us. We have a very professional singer. We have 2 really cool songs. And anyway, that's why I still work, so I can still do music. So you should let us know. We have a band. Our band might be interested in performing with some kinds of things. So just curious on the audience. And first of all, let me introduce Ron Resnick, and I head up the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. I've been doing that for a little over a year and a half. But prior to that, I spent, I retired from Intel 7 years ago, moved here to do music. And then I got recruited. And so, I've been involved in different stuff. But I got recruited from Intel and Accenture folks a little over a year and a half ago, and they asked me about blockchain, and I had no idea what it was. And so anyway, they hired me anyway. And the bottom line is it's really interesting because the whole future is tied to blockchain. But in my mind, what I'm going to talk to today are tokens, and sharing a little bit of my background. I spent 12 years in Intel and telecom. So I'm very well versed on interoperability, certification, standards, and how standards drive the global economy. And without that, you just you're never going to get to the scale that I think we'd all want to see. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit what we're doing tied to tokens and how this came about. And then if you have any questions, that'd be great. But quick question here: how many of you are developers? Raise your hand. What do the rest of you do? Business side of things, or interested in learning more about blockchain? If you raise your hand, how many of you are well versed in tokens? Raise your hand, and don't be shy. Yeah, so in fact, there's a lot of folks that don't. Okay, so talking tokens. Bottom line, I'm going to give you a definition of a token. We've been working on that. Hopefully this one makes some sense. But at the end of the day, tokens and the engineers or the developers who work on tokens, et cetera, it's very complicated. The technology behind creating tokens is not easy. And our org at the EA, Microsoft's one of our board members. They call on many companies, and every time they called on a company, and I'm speaking very big companies, they would try to explain to their management, let alone even the technology guys, the CTOs, what tokens are, because there's interest in tokens as well as blockchain. And they ultimately ended up writing and that's what I'm going to talk about, it's a token taxonomy framework. And the reason why they did is because there needed to be a better way to have folks understand what tokens can do. And so that's the problem. Lots of confusion, and I'm sure if you walk down the street and asked everybody, people in the know and not in the know, you probably get that many different answers. So here's our definition of tokens, and so it's a digital representation of something, and it does share on a blockchain. So it's shared on a distributed ledger, and it's secured by cryptography. And that's done so to prove that it's authentic and preventing the tampering or modification without the owner's consent. And a token is based on a set of rules set by the ledger, and then it's agreed to by multiple parties. So so far, this is what I've settled on, and it's still not that easy to understand, but it took work to figure out what we can say to define a token. So with that said, that just proved the point that it's still very complicated to understand what tokens are. So Microsoft approached our org and they said, look, we think that we really need to develop a framework, actually they developed a framework, and the guy who did, his name's Marley Gray, he's on our board. He spent a month and a half and worked on how to define a token, and he offered the EA to host an initiative. And this initiative is to help educate folks on how to define tokens in a non-technical manner. So this is totally non-technical, what I'm going to talk about, and it can be used across any industry. And we will use real-world analogies to explain how you can define a token. And I'll talk about how he defines, or what we do, properties and behaviors. And then I'm going to share with you this framework, and you can have this slide deck if you'd like. And it forms a common set of terms and definitions. So here's my analogy, and so I see you're a music guy. So music, there's 13 notes in the scale. You have a set of rules for composition, and that's how you make things work. But if you do follow those rules, no matter wherever you are in the world, if anybody wants to build an instrument, or create a composition or write something, if they follow those rules, you can have interoperability and communicate, and you can hear music wherever you go. That's the analogy, one of the analogies I use for tokens, because we need to do the same thing to define tokens, because if we want to see tokens for a global use case, not for proprietary solutions for a particular company and they're creating a token, but if we really want to see the whole world adapt tokens, which I believe is going to happen, and radically change global economics, you have to have this language. And so that's what we have, and we decided that the EA would host it because we have free GitHubs. GitHub is now $9 a head count. Some of you guys are checking in since they're bought by Microsoft, and I'm trying to get them to change that a little bit. But in any event, we have some assets to help create this. So we created this entity, and we just call it an initiative, Token Taxonomy Initiative. So there's a little history, and we approached IBM. All the guys you think they're all nasty competitors, IBM, R3, some of you guys who know who they are, Corda. So these are the guys who are the players in the whole ecosystem. And then you have Quorum, which is part of our org, which is from JP Morgan. And then there's a bunch of other companies, Consensus. They're all writing these clients for blockchain. We didn't want to see that happen for tokens. And so by creating an initiative that's neutral to the technology, they all joined. So this initiative that I'm sharing with you about, IBM, Corda, Digital Asset, Consensus, Accenture, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, biggest banks in the world, JP Morgan, they're all part of this initiative that I'm going to talk to you about. So if you get to know it, you'll find that we think this is going to be the trendsetter to do a good job, to try to deliver a framework to on how to define tokens. And I'm going to go pretty fast here because you can, I have a lot of slides, I'll never fit it into 20 minutes, and he'll pull me off, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of here that's even more not technical, but you really need to understand how to compose music. It doesn't happen overnight. The same thing to learn how to use this taxonomy, even if it's in English, there's no code. It still will take a little bit to learn it. And so we're actually developing with a instructional design house to create a course that folks can get certified, and we just finished putting that together, and so this course will probably be available in about 3 months, and that will help folks, and then you get a certification to show that you know how to do it. So I share with you about the initiative, and I'll talk a little about fungible, and you're going to talk more about non-fungible and tokens. And I shared with you that we have a great group of members driving this, and the goal is delivering business interoperability and through certification. I'll just talk a little more about that. So the way, his name's Marley, the way he thought about it, he talked about when he was a little kid, he likes to take things apart and put them back together. They didn't all go back together the same way he took them apart, but that's how he's programmed. So he takes a look at whatever a token is supposed to do. And then he worked on how can I define this in a way using some kind of common syntax so that everybody could speak the same language. And so that's what I'm going to share with you, how he does it, and now how we do it. And so, and he starts out with a token definition, which is really a template for what the token will be, and the class. It could be inventory class, loyalty programs, whatever it is. And then the instances are basically what the token actually can be. A token can be a barrel of oil. It could be a SKU for an item. It could be a person. It could be anything. And so what we've developed is a way to define tokens regardless of what it is. So this is where it gets at the highest level and is fungible and non-fungible and hybrid tokens. And so physical money is fungible. I can have a token, give it to somebody else for something. Loyalty points, you can trade it back and forth. A non-fungible token is a property title. There's only one, and you can't duplicate it, or a piece of art. And then you have hybrids, which is really interesting, like a theater token. A theater token can be tickets for a show that night, but each seat is non-fungible. I mean but the ticket you can exchange and sell to somebody else. So those are the types, and then you have properties and behaviors, and I'm going to go through these slides fast. This is a slide deck we use for our like an hour and a half session, but it was easy for me to give to you guys. And we have Dave Chapman here. Dave Chapman's with our org. He's he's our program manager for our token taxonomy initiative, and Kelly Alorda is with us also. So Dave is going to be one of the guys helping to put this together in a good way for folks to learn how to use this. So properties, you have two kinds of properties. One's behavioral, and then properties can be defined as, let's say, a serial number, for example. So behaviors, I'm going to go to another slide and share with you what a behavior is. And so there, what we ended up using, we have some like a phi prefix. So you'll see some Greek letters and some other letters that we're using to define tokens. And so, and I'm going to move fast here on the slides because, again, I can't cover all of it. But so I'm going to switch to this one. So behaviors. Transferable. So you can transfer the ownership of the token to someone else. And you'll see that there's a symbol on there. Yeah, that's a small symbol. So if that's described in a symbol and a syntax, you're going to know. And so when you try to figure out a token for whatever purpose, if you use these kinds of syntax, anyone can look at it and understand what it is, and then if you test for it, you can test to see whether the token actually conforms to what this is defining without using without any underlying technology behind it. So anybody wants to develop their own flavor of it, their own intellectual property, IPR, whatever it is, knock yourselves out, you can. So that's how it works. And then there's non-transferable, so I'm giving you some ideas. Mintable, if you're, let's say, drilling oil, and you now converted that oil into a barrel, and the token's the barrel of oil, that's mintable. So you can mint barrels of oil. And then you could burn them when it gets converted maybe to gasoline or something like that. So all these behaviors are going to be added to, so it's basically a language that you define, and this gets expanded more and more and more as you look at all the different categories, like you're talking about health. So that's why we're talking to HIMSS, because we talk to HIMSS, and they're interested because they'll create the framework. They'll take the basics of our framework and add to it. So anybody can add to this framework and make it work for whatever your use case is. So I'm going to slide through here, and then we have terminology, and I'm going to share with you. This is not something that you would learn overnight. This will take a little bit. That's why we know we need a course. I went to a couple events already, and you can't ramp somebody up overnight and then hold a workshop and have it be really rewarding, because they define the token. It's going to take a little bit to learn how to use this taxonomy. So basically this slide is telling you how they're classified using the artifacts, and there are definitions for all these things. Token is like an artifact group, which is the base artifacts and groups, and you can see without understanding all the nomenclature behind it, it would take some work. But I want you to see how much went into this, and that's why I'm showing the slides. And then you can get a feeling, oh, gee, how can I really put together a way to talk about tokens if I learned how to use this syntax? Yeah, we can do it. And if this gets shared and everybody's speaking the same language, it's going to be much easier than if they don't do it. Because if you can see what's happening here, where it's still work to figure out how to define a token, imagine if this didn't exist. And that's where Microsoft found out we have to do this because they were just reinventing the wheel and I'm talking about major, you can imagine the companies they call on. They were struggling, and including internal management, and Microsoft will tell you it's really hard to explain what it is. So this is a little more of a slide that you can see how we do it. We have a visual formula, and then for tooling, so we can actually create solutions that uses the tooling so they can write some code behind it. So we have visual formulas, and then you'll have the tooling formulas. So now you're starting to see how the formulas work. So if you'll see the formula fungible with a class of non-fungibles and fungibles, and it gets, then there's a way to define all these categories. And so here is some examples like a vote. And you'll see the symbols on the left side, but the explanation is there. Non-fungible, non-transferable, suspendable, implicit. And so once you know these, you can, it's like writing code too. Once you know them, you can then define it, show it to somebody else, and they're going to know what it is. So I'm just sharing with you how this works, and then you can see how they hierarchical structure. This can be used to define you can put smart contracts into this, and then ultimately you create workshops. So we'll be going around the world working to create workshops. Once you're certified and you know how to define a token, you can create a workshop here or whatever you want and host it, and we can go ahead and share with the group. But they have to be ramped up to know how to use this, or it doesn't work out, because I've already experienced one that didn't. They all need to pass and get and understand what they are. If not, it's not going to be productive. So you can see these are all the slides that go into defining tokens. So I only have a few more minutes. I want to talk to a little bit about the whole purpose of all this. It's all deals with standards. And that's one of my core backgrounds. Although my core side of what I do is biz dev, marketing, and that kind of stuff. I'm a double E, but I'm not a programmer, so I can't write code for blockchain. But I do know that standards really is the way to make this work. And even in our board in EA, they're bedding down on standards, and no one's writing standards yet other than us that I know of, that are going to be tested through a certification program. So that's why, and you guys are familiar with Hyperledger, we're partners with Hyperledger. Hyperledger will writes code, and they write a specification that's open source. And open source can work if you standardize it to a spec, like through that what you could do in either in the token initiative or even what we do in whatever it is, and then you certify and test to that spec. So you still can get the benefit of open source code, but without having a way to certify that it conforms to a certain features that are commercially viable, that the customers would want, you're going to have a much tougher time to do a few things. And one of the things that we're seeing is slowing down the whole notion of tokenization as well as blockchain. It deals with custodianship. So I don't know if you know what qualified custodians are. So they're like the escrow company. So you need qualified custodians who are going to be the holders of the assets and you'll trust. And then you need insurance companies to support the whatever the transaction is. Very hard right now. Very few insurance companies are qualified custodians, and the biggest one are the regulators. So the whole point of what we're doing is to get regulatory bodies to trust, and and I've been dealing with regulators for 20 years in many industries. And when I was at Intel, so it was very easy for me to go talk to the major regulators all over the world, which I've done. They'll tell me, oh, this company called on us, and they're telling me this. And then the next company told them that. So the notion of having an organization back whatever it is, like us on the token side, they trust us more than they'll trust a company calling on them. And so we actually serve a good purpose, and that's why we encourage a lot of the companies who like to do it on their own. They know they can't. And then, so that's our purpose, is to deliver certification so we can get regulatory bodies on board. This is what we need to do on tokens. Because if not, you'll just see tokens, you know, for different use cases, and the company will make a token for, it could be, you know, it could be a UPS token and it goes nowhere else. You can't use it to transfer over to FedEx, to transfer over to somewhere else, but maybe you'd like that, you know. And another one is game tokens. That's a little kid came up with the idea. You spend some money on game, you're stuck, because that's how the games work. But what if it was a token? Then you could take that token and use it for another game. Well, imagine if you did with all the gaming companies. They'd sell more games. Anyway, so we see that really happening, and the standards process works very, very methodically. We're not reinventing the wheel, and partly what I'm involved in, and actually with David, he has a strong background in this as well. It's really, really straightforward how to develop a standards program. So that's what we do. Well, we want to serve the industry writing the standard, which is this framework with no underlying technology. And by doing so, we're winning over a lot of companies who wouldn't join up with Ethereum or Corda or whatever, because they'll view it as proprietary, or it's to serve one company. So we're coming across as we're just, well, we're there for the common good, and they all liked it. So so again, like I shared with you, IBM is like actively engaged, and so all the companies you think, gee, how are they really doing that? It's true, they are, and they're involved because they know if they don't, it's going to be really hard winning over the tokens globally for interoperability, particularly if you use a mainnet, and so a public network that's permissionless, and that's another area that I could talk about. But one of the other things that we're doing is we're going to standardize the public mainnets the same way I'm talking to you about tokens, so that public mainnets are going to be the commercial applications of them can be trusted. So that's it. If you want to know more about our initiative, we've got a website, tokentaxonomy.org. Pete's got the presentation. We're going to actually publish the framework, so folks can download. But if somebody wants to claim that they're using this framework, and we're going to have a logo, and they're going to want to say that it conforms to our spec, they must be a member, they must get it tested. And that's the honest broker that they will have. So we will expect companies, when they issue an RFP, to, if they're going for a loyalty program, let's say Star Alliance wants to issue tokens for all their airlines, and United may not use the same developer as Lufthansa, but they definitely want to use the token. Well, the odds are, if they issue an RFP and says it needs to conform to this TTF and needs to be certified, it's a better chance it's going to work than them trying to figure out who's developing what and then confuse everyone, and mostly not have multiple vendors of choice. So that's it. If there are questions.
Have you found EA's taxonomy to be ahead of the curve, or are you going into like Europe or Asia and seeing some other activity that you have to sort things out?
Good question. So the answer is I'd say we could be considered right at the leading edge, but there's other organizations that are working on taxonomies. I'm speaking to one in the UK. I'm actually speaking with the government of China. But the bottom line, after we share with them what we're doing, usually they get it. Actually, they do. And so we try to build I'm the biz dev guy, so I'm involved actively in it. We enter into an engagement with them so they don't feel like they're threatened, because all we're doing is say, look, just use the same language. And so far, we've been very successful in getting them to go, okay, you're not infringing on how we're going to define the use cases for a token. You're not telling us how we should go about it, because we're not. They can do whatever they want. So they sort of like it. So so the answer is yeah. There are plenty of folks who are working on tokens, and some are going to try to create their own, like, EOS, whatever. But at the end of the day, we could talk to any one of those guys, and it doesn't stop them from saying, oh yeah, we'll use your language. So, any other questions? For the tokens, see, that's a real interesting question. We're going to stay out of that. All we're going to do is, if the folks want to do cross-chain transactions, and there's lots of folks who are trying to do that, Ion and all kinds, I know all those guys, a good chunk of them, and I call it as interworking. It's not interoperable, but it's interworking. So the bottom line, if you have, like WANchains Local, I know good buddies with those guys. So there will be lots of ways to do it. They want to do it, it's fine. All we're saying is, okay, if you're doing it, just all speak the same language, because if they all did, and somebody were to use one chain, and then somebody wants to use another chain, it would be nice if they could pull one out and put another one in if they weren't happy with that provider. That's all we're trying to do. So if we went much further, they wouldn't go for what we're doing. So we're being very careful about keeping us very innocent, maybe the right word, where we have no business interest. We're not sharing with anyone what to do, how to do it. But there's no doubt what you're saying. Then there's plenty of activity on trying to make that work.
One question behind me.
Behind me.
You showed your tokenization for things that were quantified, like a barrel of oil, but how does it handle things that are amorphous, like a tanker of oil, or oil in a pipeline, or oil still in the ground?
Oh, it's a great question. So at the end of the day, we'd invite you to a workshop, okay? And he would tell us, okay, what are the behaviors and the properties of that tanker? That might be the name of the tanker. It might be how many people are working on it. It might be how much is the metadata defining that. What's the storage of that tanker? Then you use this, and you just use the symbols, and you create that whole storyline in the syntax, and says, this is the definition of how we could all speak the same language. And then they have to, and so we're not telling them how to do what you just asked. Then those folks who are in that business have to decide, can we do it or not? Should we tokenize tankers? So that's why I'm saying we stay out of that, but we just help by providing the language. Does that help? Okay.
Strategically looking at it in terms of how you get this adopted, are you focusing more on people that are like in the manufacturing space or retail, or where do you see, from a use case scenario that's been driving?
Gotcha. So actively involved in this is Accenture, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, all of them. And they have, one has 400 clients, and IBM's in on it. They have 1,000 initiatives going on. So we don't know. And so, but again, what we're trying to do is have it so everybody uses the same language. So I'll share with you why I think this is really good, and this is where I come from. I would hate to see, and it deals with identity, and you can stop whenever you want and tell me. If you deal with identity, I know many different verticals right now are trying to use their own, sovereign, and you have DID, DIF, and all these other folks who work in identity. But at the end of the day, there's industries who think they want to own the identity of everybody in the world. The telecom, the automotive, the health, that's not good. Okay, and so, but they all want to own it because they want to follow the money and get the customer. So if we had a better way to define how this can work, the goal would be, and this is one of the things I'm actually working on, trying to get like the telecom, I'm talking the GSMA, they're interested in this, and if we can get like an organization like the GSMA, they drive all of your 5G, I come out of telecom, they drive everything that has to do with telecom. If you got them on board, that's a win. Then you go to him or the healthcare, and if they all can agree on the language, maybe they'll agree on how you can define identity, because a token can be an identity too. So we're working on it, and then you have to get the government, I don't know which government you work for, but you have to get government regulators on board.
One final one,
Yeah, you can. See, we don't produce anything. So if you could join right now, we actively are working in defining these tokens. If you wanted to work with the team, and you'd be working with the Microsofts, IBM, all these companies, they're all in on it, and you say, I want to create a workshop, I want to create a use case for how to tokenize market research in the financial community, then you would use some of these behaviors and properties and then add to it. And then bring in fellow travelers, and then you can, if you're a developer, you can tokenize it and sell it. So nothing is stopping anyone from diving in on this, except that we definitely need to have everybody speak the same language. So we know we need to do this, more training. But this is actively running right now. We had a face-to-face hosted at Microsoft New York at Consensus about a month ago. So this is happening within 2 months. I can share with you 2 months. The first published version will come out. So we're moving forward. All right, thanks.
Thank you to Ron. So watch this space. I'm sure we'll get Ron or something back in maybe 3 months to dive a bit deeper into the subject. So we're going to carry on with the theme of tonight, all about tokens, and going to welcome Courtney Brock up to the stage, and she's going to talk about non-fungible tokens, which is a mouthful, but she's going to explain completely what they're about. So give us 30 seconds to switch over, and is that you all? She's got the screen running. Good. Super. Come over here.
Going back and forth.
All right.
The first one. All right.
All right. Okay. Most important thing, use these, because otherwise your laptop will slide off.
Oh, thank you for letting me know that.
You've got power there. I think that will probably work.
I guess it's just sort of
Yeah. They just
sit like.
definitely use the microphone.
Oh, and here's a
Great.
microphone.
Over to
Great.
you.
Hi, my name is Courtney Brock. I just found out that I actually have more things in common with Ron than I thought. My degree was actually in music education, so I spent more years than I probably should have trying to explain complex things to middle school and high schoolers that didn't necessarily want it to be there, but still had to be anyways. And then somewhere along the line, I ended up in blockchain, and there's a lot in between that. But I got involved in the non-fungible token space super early on, and this presentation kind of just gives an overview of why I got so excited about them and why I think they are important and have a lot of use cases. I will also say that I am not a coder. I come from the business ops sides of things, so I'm more interested in the economics and use cases of things. But for all of the coders out there, I have included many, many, many links. So when this is uploaded to the collective webpage, you can look at it, download it, and dive into depth about things that I have no time to dive into during the presentation. So that starts. What are they and why should I care? So I'm going to start off with a brief explanation of different assets. Okay. So you've got a lot of different kinds of asset classes. So you've got fungible assets, non-fungible, tangible versus intangible, liquid versus illiquid. And you can kind of see we've got two nice in a Bitcoin. Every Satoshi is worth a Satoshi. Fungible. And you have tangible versus intangible. So for example, intangible would be Bitcoin or your credit card because it's not something that you physically hold, whereas your tangible would be your gold bars. And then we get down to non-fungible. So non-fungibles are things that only have value if they're in their whole. So for example, I can take $1 and I can divide it into 4 quarters, and each quarter of $1 is worth 25 cents. However, I cannot take an extremely valuable baseball card and rip it into 4 pieces and have each piece of that baseball card be worth 1/4 of the value of the baseball card. Basically, you damage the baseball card, no more value. And then you've got the intangible versus tangible. Tangible, non-fungible items are your home, art, things like that. And there's liquid versus illiquid. And basically what that is how easy is it for you to tap into the actual value of your asset. So obviously the most liquid thing is cash. I can go into a store, I can put something on my credit card, I immediately receive the item, liquid. Stocks, bonds, and CDs, a little bit less liquid. You know, CDs might have a certain time period that it has to sit there, but eventually you have access back to it. Real estate, art, and wine and collectibles go in the middle. And that's actually going to be a huge place that I focus on, is the collectibles middle area. And then you keep on going down to retirement accounts. Obviously, you hold on to those for a very, very, very long time before the government allows you to get any money out of them. And then you get down into, you know, your VC and your hedge funds, private equity, and those usually have to sit around for a while before anybody sees anything that resembles cash. So one of the big things that has happened in the internet age is the internet allowed a lot of new ways to create value that weren't there before. And so basically, when you can leverage an online platform to allow people's illiquid assets a little bit more elbow grease, more connection, you can kind of see that there's that graph, you can create value that wasn't that people weren't previously able to tap into. So for example, eBay, you know, specializes in collectibles, and collectibles are actually something that I've had a lot of experience in, and I find them fascinating because it's an item that its value is completely subjective, and it's not only subjective based upon things like time or product, it's also subjective based upon audience. So for example, if I collect little glass figurines, I may be willing to pay a stupid amount of money for a rare one, but if I don't care about little glass figurines, I'm not willing to pay anything. So you have this flexible valuation based upon all of that. And then, so what eBay does is that you're able to tap into these niche audiences and connect to them online. And so if you're really trying to make money by turning collectibles, you have an automatic area to tap into your tiny niche market. Tons of value. Airbnb, real estate, fairly illiquid, but is a very valuable, non-fungible asset to have. And typically, you really only got value out of it if you sold your property, or if you were long-term, you were renting it out to a long-term renter. A lot of the home vacation rentals might have been managed by an agency that took a giant overhead or really just had their own properties. Airbnb pops up and allows people to use their own properties as short-term vacation rentals, meaning that someone can own a property and they can constantly tap liquidity out of an asset that's normally very hard to liquidate. Something that I learned, venture capitalists get very, very, very excited every time a new use case comes up that allows people to tap into the liquidity of illiquid assets. Okay, so that brings us to the crypto versions. So your ERC20s are your fungible assets. Most of this is going to just talk about Ethereum protocols because that's the area that I was in, but obviously these overall cases could be applied to all sorts of tokens, all sorts of coins. That's why the definitions are really, really important. So ERC20s would have been your fungibles, and then your ER721s are your non-fungibles, and you can see a handful of the infamous CryptoKitties underneath that. And so you have different use cases for both of them. So fungible tokens, you know, if you're thinking about what do I need this token for, it's what Ron was talking about was behavioral aspects of the token. And you're saying, I only need one kind of token, needs to be interchangeable with other tokens. So these are great for store value and point of sale, settlements. You could do reward points from a store. When you get to official tokenized securities or tokenized equity offerings. Especially once there are official SEC guidelines coming out with tokenized equity offerings. I expect we'll see a lot of them. Non-fungible, so you need things that aren't, you know, interchangeable, and what that means is that you can have digitally unique items, which means digital collectibles. Physical product authentication using the digital token. This is also when you get into how you're gonna, you know, there's been a lot of talk about legal documentation on the blockchain, and non-fungibles really leave room for deeds, titles, you know, certificates, social security cards, things like that. There's a lot of use cases that could come out of it. All right, so CryptoKitties. So I am known by most of my friends as a crazy cat lady. Was also at the same time a crazy crypto lady. So on the very first day that CryptoKitties had their open, you know, platform, I read the article about it. I was busy going off to go do something, and I thought it was hilarious and that people would be disappointed in me if I didn't at least explore it, considering both of my interests. I remember posting on Facebook an article about it, and I said, this will either be the best or worst use of my Ethereum. But what's really amazing is that when I got into it, like my economic brain started spinning, and I realized that this wasn't even just, this wasn't cute, dumb cats. This is a brand new asset class. Because prior to the 721 standard, you could not have a digitally unique item that could be authenticated. So basically, think about it this way. Like, let's say that you are a digital artist, and your work is up on the internet, and people can take a little screenshot or download the art, and it can be copied and passed and passed and passed, and there is zero way to determine what the original was or who has ownership rights or any of those things. At this point, let's say that you're a digital artist and you would like to release a limited run, which limited run of prints, which a lot of physical artists do. So in this case, you actually could say that, okay, well, here's my piece of digital art, and I'm going to release 200 of these, and the token would be able to identify not only which number in the series that they were, but it would be able to authenticate the fact that it was part of that series and not somebody's screenshot. So you truly owned that piece of art, which is digital. So there is articles for you to read, and because it's a new asset class, it had the ability to create a new economic model. And it was fascinating to me at the time. This is, going into December of 2017. We are at the height of ICO madness, billions of dollars pumped into ICOs, and digital cats nearly break the Ethereum network. And this is how they broke it, is because they understand human behavior. And so basically what they did is they merged 3 well-known economic behaviors. I'm a huge fan of behavioral economics, which basically says as much as you think you make rational decisions when it comes to finances and money, you don't. And if you think you do, you're definitely lying to yourself. And so they merged 3 of these things. And so one of them is the market value of collectibles, completely subjective. Why do you like a cat? That kitty with a little mustache? I have an emotional attachment to that cat. Why? Because that was my first crypto kitty. I don't know how much value I would want for it. I probably wouldn't sell it because it's what got me into this. But then they did 2 things that were really, really, really creative. And they combined 2 things I've never seen combined before. So what they did is they used this breeding system, right? So they released their Gen Zero kitties. And I don't remember exactly how the first several ones were priced, but eventually there was an algorithm that the Gen Zero kitties were priced on. So even the ones that were directly being sold by CryptoKitties, their prices were based on market sentiment. So that was really interesting too, because it's one of those situations in companies where it's really fascinating. If the company sets a price on something, everybody's going to complain it's too high, I don't want to spend that. If the market sets a price on it, everybody automatically says, oh, well, that must be correct. It's just human behavior. If the group says it's correct, it's correct. And so you've got this cat breeding, and they've developed this genetic structure where the cats have this huge series of genetic attributes, and when you breed 2 cats together, you're essentially mining a coin, and it creates a new CryptoKitty. And that CryptoKitty may or may not carry more or less rare traits. And so what that brings you back to is variable rewards, which is essentially one of the most compulsive human behavior tricks ever designed. Variable rewards are slot machines. It means you don't know when the reward is happening, but it could happen. And especially after it's happened once, then you're like, well, I know it's going to happen again. And so you just keep on getting it in. And then there's actual real value attached to it. So you've got this variable reward system, dopamine receptors, completely throwing rationality out the door. And then within the same platform, within the same website, the last one is laziness, which is people will always opt for the easiest thing right in front of them. So even if something is cheaper, but it takes me a lot more work to get it, I probably end up just buying the more expensive thing because it's right in front of me. So there's that, plus familiar mental models for liquidating illiquid collectibles, eBay. They basically combined slot machines and eBay. And so what you have is an incentive to keep buying cats and breeding them, because then you know that there are people who want to buy your cats, and on the same exact platform you can put them up there and somebody's willing to pay you. Like, and this is what, like, it's December 2017, Ethereum is skyrocketing. Again, with mental models, people don't translate things correctly in their head necessarily, like as far as dollar amounts. Like, so you have a whole bunch of people whose primary currency is dollars. And whereas they understand that $1 does not equal 1 Ethereum, they don't understand it to the exact level they should. So whereas even on a mobile game, like, I'm the kind of person that I'll play mobile games, and until they get to the place where there's a real paywall, then I stop playing it because I'm just not going to pay for a mobile game. But then, you know, with CryptoKitties, you're sitting there and you're just like, well, I bought this Ethereum a while ago, and then it grew, and this was money I never really had. I don't even know, is it money? And then you have this digital asset that, you know, costs maybe 0.34 Ethereum. And in your head, when you're going that fast, you don't do the math to understand what the dollar amount of 0.3 Ethereum is, especially when you have an asset that's volatile and changing moment by moment. This is how about $20 million went through CryptoKitties in about a month and a half. The way that they decide that they took their money is all sales of Gen Zero cats went back to the company, and then on the market sales they took 3.75% commission from the seller. And again, you're like, oh, you're taking a little bit of my money. You know, I could just bring this to a decentralized Ethereum exchange and do this. No, you're not going to do that because you're lazy. And the UX is pretty. And it's right there. So lots of links about that. CryptoKitties to date has raised $27 million in VC funding, if you didn't know that. And to let you know a little secret, it's not because of cats. It has a lot to do with what they let happen and the fact that the products they're producing are proof of concepts for larger things. And one of the most fascinating things that they did is they let their community be a little Wild West. They didn't interfere too much, you know. If your target, you know, you say if you build it, they will come. Well, if you build it and your target market are tech-savvy hackers, they will hack. And very, very quickly, within days, people had created auto-birthing bots. They had created blockchain explorers that broke down the genetic breakdown of each of the cats. They created Chrome plugins so that when you were looking at CryptoKitties, you could see the exact percentages of each genetic feature that was found within the cat so that you could have a better idea of which cats you were supposed to breed together to get the one that would earn you more money. People made a lot of money off of this. So there's a link up there, which is Kitty Tools. And what's interesting is most of them are third-party built. A lot of them are not built by the company themselves. A lot of the original ones that were built within the first couple of months that the company existed no longer exist. Better tools replaced them, but there are a huge number of tools. And it lets you understand that you're not just looking at a picture of a cat, you're really looking at a really complex system that is incredibly novel and really hadn't been done before. And so crypto winter begins, Ethereum prices start sinking, and everybody says, wow, we've got these cats and I want to do something with them. What should I do with these cats? And again, the community started building things, and CryptoKitties said, sure, I'll let you create content for me that I didn't pay for. So you get kitty hats. Kitty hats are ERC20 tokens of hats that you can buy for your cat.
ERC20 or ERC7?
They're actually 20s. They're just fungibles. They weren't meant to be unique, but basically you were able to buy a hat for your cat, and then later on you could buy art for your cat and several different accessories for your cat. This leads to something very interesting in the next slide. Then people started building games based on their cats because they let people use their KPIs and people were building it, and we saw kitty carts. So you could have your kitties race go-karts, and that was third-party built. And so at this point, that's when they've received their first round of funding, and they become Dapper Labs. Their company name is not CryptoKitties, they're Dapper Labs, and they create the Kittyverse. And the Kittyverse essentially is this whole world of tools that community members can use to build and play and create within the CryptoKitties space. It actually led to the creation of another standard, which is one that's really obscure, but it's really interesting, and that's ERC 998. And basically what that is a protocol that allows your 721 token to actually be the owner of other tokens. So now you own the cat, but you don't actually own the hat. The cat now owns the hat. You can take them apart if you want to. You can leave them together. There's a way to put them together, but you now have a structure for tokens owning tokens. Lots of things that you can see tons and tons of links there. Not going into any of them. I will quickly just point to Nifty license, and basically what this is it's work that they put into place to try to create a license for all of these people building games on non-fungibles, as far as what the user rights to the items were. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that there's this still big question that's still not entirely answered, is visual metadata really can't be contained on the token. Where does the visual metadata live? And it's a huge question that's still being worked out. But basically, what the Nifty license does is it lays out what somebody's ownership rights are to the token they purchased. And then I just stuck this here because it made me laugh, because I found this upon researching articles that came out in December 17. So if you read the title of December 17 carefully, notice there's a company, there's a token. It's been in the news lately, that title. No one's laughing yet, so they haven't made the connection. So then you see June 2019, there's an SEC news press release that doesn't have anything in there, but there is somebody here who knows exactly what I am talking about. And that is the massive lawsuit that the SEC is pressing against the KIK token. And I didn't realize this, but apparently the KIK token was the token that had to push back their launch because of the CryptoKitties clogging up the Ethereum blockchain. Just seemed like a funny wraparound. Okay, so next company that I'm going to talk about is Loom Network. And I find Loom Network fascinating because, again, their proof of concept has been in the game space, and it's one of these things that we see constantly in new technology. It's that your new technology gets experimented in the device industries because there's a much lower risk involved. As somebody put it when I was listening to them, they said, you would not have Netflix if you did not first have streaming porn. You can thank streaming porn for all of the streaming video we experience today, because obviously that was a low-risk experiment for them. Once that technology was perfected, real giant companies picked it up to the, shows that we love now that completely obscure cable television. So I'm sure that cable networks also have some feelings on that. So Loom is really interesting because, again, their use cases go extremely far beyond games, but they chose to sit in games because this is where the developments were happening, and it was a way for them to play with these concepts. So the very first project that they came out with was the Crypto Zombie Coding School. It's actually really cool. It's about 6 lessons, and you can go through them. They advise that you already have somewhat of a coding background, but if you, but it doesn't have to be like a hardcore coding background, just know the basics of code. And they lead you through the process and show you how to create a non-fungible token, which results in a crypto zombie. And then later on you had interoperability, which is where you could import your crypto kitties for your zombies to eat. Now, don't worry, nothing happens to the actual token. It's just a hilarious visual gag. But there's links about that. Much bigger project of Loom's is they decided they were going to do their main area of work in Ethereum sidechains because clearly we saw that a single active commercial use case of Ethereum-based tokens essentially broke the network. So some people consider it a blessing in disguise. It really woke a lot of people up to the fact that Ethereum was not ready to carry actual uses yet. But there had to be something done in the meantime. And so Loom set their focus to sidechains, specifically using Plasma. And there's a whole bunch of links. I am not going to go through that because that gets real technical, but if exactly how Loom's Plasma chains works is up your alley, those links are really good. What's been interesting too is that as they've gone on, it just started with Ethereum, but it also bridges other chains that have been developed off of Ethereum as well. And here's a nice picture for you coders that explains how the back and forth transfers from the Ethereum mainnet to the Plasma chain works. You can spend your own time digging into that if it means anything to you. All right, so this is the part where it's not just games. Right now, Loom probably has about 20-ish projects that are using Plasma chain. But there's a couple of things on there. There's a good handful of things on there that are not game-based. So, of course, everybody has been talking about blockchain and supply chain because they really do fit together very, very naturally. So there is one supply chain company that is using Loom. The decentralized finance app called Alice, I would like to look into a little bit more, but it seems to have some interesting concepts behind it. And then one of them is called Crypto Raves. And it seems to be more based on social media as a reputation system. And here's where I give my thoughts on the fact that all new technology is simultaneously the best and worst thing to happen to people at the same time. So this could be cool. Could be like that episode of Black Mirror. Always a possibility. Who knows? China's got blockchain. All right, so then there's one last protocol to talk about, which is ERC 1155, and this one is the one that takes the most time to wrap your brain around. And basically, the way that I can explain it in the least technical way possible is 1155 is essentially an envelope protocol that allows you to deploy both non-fungible and fungible tokens at the same time through the same contract. Whole bunch of articles. You can read into that further. There's a video. The video is a good video. It's a very short video. It explains it far better than I could. Loom has been working on one that's very specific to their sidechain. They're very, very similar back and forth, a couple of differences. And there's an article below that helps explain what those differences are because they are small. All right, and so this brings us way back to the beginning about values created when online platforms are used to increase liquidity or basically help push business cases for tangible items. And so yeah, if non-fungible tokens can be used to authenticate unique digital items, can't we use them to authenticate physical items? Why not? And of course, it's happening. Microsoft and Consensus have partnered with LVMH, which is a big conglomerate of couture manufacturers, to have product authentication. There's a huge issue with luxury good knockoffs. And so being able to authenticate your luxury good on their system with a non-fungible token means that even if somebody really manages to create an incredibly good knockoff, you have this final step of proof that that it actually is what it claims to be. And then that could go across the board for a lot of things. You know, we do a lot of our purchasing online. I think about jewelry, I think about diamonds. Diamonds are one of those classic cases of stores of value that are non-fungible. The reason why diamonds are non-fungible versus gold being fungible is because each diamond has to be graded on cut and clarity and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say that you're trying to buy a diamond on eBay. Well, that feels like a terribly frightening thing to do, right? Because somebody could be pricing something and giving you something that it's not. But if there was actually a way for an online seller to authenticate that this in fact is the exact product that they're selling, that gives a lot more confidence to the consumer to go ahead and make the transaction. So why doesn't everybody know about this yet? Because it seems like this is a really good thing for businesses. So this little tiny blurb here is my crypto echo chamber, and this represents everybody who has gotten into crypto to the point where they forgot how long it took them to get from the place where Bitcoin was magic internet money to a thing you actually understand. And you forget that part. And so you just assume that everybody else, oh yeah, no, Bitcoin, that's a thing, right? Yeah, like I know exactly what Bitcoin does. I know why it works. I know why it's worth something. And then you have everybody else who looks at you cross-eyed and thinks you're insane. So this next one's about non-fungibles. Oh, what about people in crypto? Well, why don't crypto people know about non-fungibles? Because you've got an even smaller echo chamber inside an already pretty small echo chamber. A lot of non-fungible folks have really been focused in the gaming space, and enterprise and gaming are not communicating with each other, even though they're sharing incredibly similar use cases. And all of the people who are in non-fungible token gaming and in that space are suddenly shocked to realize that the vast majority of people in crypto, like people who know a lot about crypto, have been doing this for years, still have no idea what you're talking about. And so big thing is, big reason for all of that is that there's a lot of UX problems to overcome before anybody cares. Because when it comes down to it, mass adoption doesn't happen until there's a UX that makes sense to people. So we're going to have to build interfaces that don't require the user to know anything about blockchain. Wallets that are safe, that allow for password resets. That's one of the biggest problems, right? Because especially if somebody wants to keep a valuable asset on them, but we all understand now that at this point, you know, you've got your private keys, you lose your private keys, and whoops, sorry, it's gone. Might as well be at the bottom of the ocean. People don't like that. Huge barrier to mass adoption. The product needs to fulfill an existing desire better than current options. And that ties into the next one, which is solving philosophical or ideological problems like decentralization, which is preached like the gospel in crypto land. It's only important to the early adopters. It's only important to the people who get this movement going, because if we go back to this frame, none of these people care about decentralization. It's not what they spend their days thinking about. Solutions to metadata storage. I mean, where do we put all this information? There's a huge, especially those the 1155 protocols, there's a lot of availability there for housing deeds. I mean, you literally could have all of your housing documents for your mortgage, your title, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, contained within an 1155 protocol. But that's a lot of information to keep, and where are you putting it all? Article on that. One of the things that is just been put out in alpha form is Dapper Labs, so the CryptoKitties folks. This is why they got the next 15 million after their first 12 million, is they have developed a multi-sig smart contract wallet that does allow for password resets. And the real question is it gonna fix the safety problems that happened with the Parity wallet, which was essentially, you know, people lost a whole lot of Ethereum due to hacks. So there is some articles on that and a safety review, and I think that where that goes is yet to be seen, but it's in development. And these are just some things to read on the side. These are some other non-fungible projects. There is one on Hyperledger, it looks like, that people have been working on. These are projects I don't know much about, but I have the links to them. Please feel free to read them. Blockchain game websites. These are actually really interesting because, again, with that whole echo chamber thing, the people who frequent these websites and build these websites and are part of these websites don't understand that they're in an echo chamber, meaning that nobody else knows what they are. And there is a ton of amazing information contained in these web pages as far as what developments are happening in that space. And this is someone I wanted to bring up because Tony Sheng is someone who's worked with Decentraland, which is, you know, one of the early non-fungible projects. And he has a blog that is mostly based on crypto economics. And for a long time, I've thought that he is just the most underrated person, the thought leader in crypto, because I'm sure none of you have ever heard of him. He is not a very large figure like a lot of crypto Twitter celebrities. But he has several articles, very, very interesting, on blockchains and games, but those only make up a portion of his articles. A lot of them are on crypto economics in general. And I consistently think that he is just spot on with his analysis of everything always. So highly would encourage that if you're interested in that kind of thing. And these are final thoughts. I had to add this picture. It's Vitalik with his kitty bag. Especially because CryptoKitties were the first non-fungible game piece that came out. And this was a quote from Vitalik that came out, I don't remember when he said it, but this was a long time ago. This was not a quote that came out after CryptoKitties. This was years beforehand. And he said, "I happily played World of Warcraft during 2007 to 2010, but one day Blizzard removed the damage component from my beloved Warlock Siphon life spell. I cried myself to sleep, and on that day I realized what horrors centralized services can bring. I soon decided to quit." So yeah, that is my overview that I've tried to give as briefly as possible. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions about any of this stuff. If it's something I can't answer, there's a good chance that I can connect you with somebody who can answer it. So yeah, that is end of the show.
Any questions?
You talked about non-fungible tokens for the cats and fungible tokens for the hats. Is there a solution for the cat in the hat?
I think that's where it started. There's a lot of creative ideas that came out of really stupid suggestions. Yeah.
I've seen news lately both Dapper Labs with their next game, Cheese Wizards, but then also little rumors that Ubisoft is exploring NFTs.
Uh-huh.
Where do you think the future is? Do you think it will be organic, bottoms up from the crypto native startups, or do you think it will be the large incumbent game companies that get in and use, Ethereum NFTs?
That is an excellent question, because that is a discussion that absolutely I have been watching unfold for a while. So far, it seems like from major companies, Ubisoft is the only one who is really putting their foot in the pool. It doesn't really seem that any of the other major AAA studios have really gotten involved or really are thinking about it. One of the big reasons is that if you're already making a ton of money, you have to have a giant incentive to change your model. And a lot of the AAA studios have carefully crafted models that make them a ton of money. And so I think one of the things that, again, this is an echo chamber problem. I think one of the problems is that a lot of people who are building these blockchain games think adoption is going to happen a lot sooner than it will. I think a lot of them think that we'll start seeing breakout adoption within the next year. I personally think we're not going to see it for as long as 4 to 5 years. And so I think it's going to be an extremely slow grassroots built up from the bottom solution. And I think what will happen one day is, it's like I said with adoption, I think it was a couple of problems for UX, is that the product has to fulfill an existing desire or need better than the current options. And so basically what happens is we get to a point where these games have become sophisticated enough that regular video gamers want to play them. Because the truth is right now that technology is not sophisticated enough for these games to interest anyone outside of crypto. So it's going to take still many years for that technology to grow to that level of sophistication. But at the point in which these games grow to that level of sophistication, you've had a lot of fails and corrections, people in the crypto gaming world figure out what actually works versus what doesn't work, which they are nowhere near figuring out yet. At that point, what might happen is basically, I heard a quote once that said, a raise is only a raise for 30 days, then it's just how much you make. And it basically explains that once you give something to people, even if they didn't have it before, like very recently before, they very quickly forget that they didn't have it, and all of a sudden they assume that they should be having this thing. So I don't think large gaming studios will have any incentive to make any changes to their model until there is a large enough consumer base leaving their products. And I think that's going to take a long time.
You mentioned Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
If they were to ask you for advice, they should think about developing either fungible or non-fungible, what would you tell them?
So something like Airbnb, I mean, their online platform, for the most part right now, does what it needs to do. This is also a part of blockchain adoption and things like that, is not everyone needs one. And people hate hearing that. And it's very much it's kind of one of those situations where just from working with startups, I've realized if your startup has to ask the question, how can we use a blockchain or an app, you don't need one. So, like, either that is the foundation of your product or you don't need one. There could be potential use cases in the future that Airbnb could find something. I think it would more be within reputation systems, honestly, than anything to do with the actual homes. Because reputation systems and things like Airbnb's places that you're going to actually stay can be quite important, knowing that people's comments aren't being censored. Yeah. So that one made me laugh. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what their interface looks like, because I really got a chuckle out of this. Is Pete and I had planned for me to talk about non-fungible tokens and potential use cases a little while back, and literally a couple of days after we decide on this, Pete sends me a press release from Microsoft talking about their partnership with luxury goods. And the reason why that made me laugh so hard is because I had that pegged as the very first, like, big use case probably last March, because it just seems super obvious to me that if you have a technology that can basically confirm identity, and what types of products have trouble confirming identity but luxury goods. And I was like, oh, that's going to happen. I don't know who's going to do it, but it's going to happen.
I mean, could you imagine like a little QR code printed on the inside of the heel that you could scan with your smartphone? Yep, this is sure enough a Louis Vuitton, this or that.
That's what I want. That's what I'm curious about. That's what I want to ask Marley about that, because my assumption was that it might be something like that, that was a scannable QR code that was actually embedded in the material, so it couldn't be. But I'm not sure how they're planning on doing it.
Just a follow-up, what about art? I'm actually not thinking fungible, or non-fungible, but because you make that into some form of fungible, so you own a
Yes, you can. And I wish I remembered the name of the company. They're in England. Look that up. Look up I will try, you know what I'll do is I will try to find the thing that I'm forgetting currently and post it on the collective page, because there is a company in England that is essentially building a platform to do that. And that would create the art world version of things like Airbnb. And so they would be fungible tokens, they wouldn't be non-fungible, but basically you could collect, like, you know, maybe you have a historical piece of art at a museum, and the museum needs to raise funds because, you know, museums have trouble raising funds, and they could essentially do an equity token sale for the item, and you could have collective ownership of, you could own a tiny piece of the Mona Lisa.
They're doing that real estate, fractional ownership
Mm-hmm.
all the time right now.
Yeah, exactly. That might be the name. Yep, that's it. He had it. I'll still find a link and post it, but that's the name.
Do you have any maybe more like CPA resources? So I'm trying to start out with 1155, but I'm trying to calculate what's my cost of goods. Do you have any kind of guidance on trying to figure that out?
Those are some of the problems I have spent the past year thinking about. If you're interested in picking my brain, I would be curious in delving into your problem, because those are the kind of problems I tend to be really interested in trying to solve.
You talked about the kitties having features added through genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, genetics have a whole suite of other characteristics like epigenetics that influence what expresses, and then microRNA, which also modifies expression. Can you integrate those additional behaviors into these features, like extend them so that you have more complexity?
So, for example, and yeah, I mean, these are some of the experiments that can be created with this technology. So, in the original, you know, in the CryptoKitties contract deployment, it's just, you know, a genetic mishmash, just plain old that. But theoretically, you could absolutely include variations like you're talking about. And because I'm not a coder, I have zero idea how you do that. But I mean, that's absolutely something that someone who has been working in the space for a long time might be able to think about how that could get added into the mix. One of the really difficult things about smart contract deployments is, and especially with gaming, is that you don't have the ability to have randomness. You can only have the appearance of randomness because everything is actually coded, so you can't do randomization. Well, we're probably close to time. Was there anything else? I'll just wrap up.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks.
Thank you to Courtney for such a in-depth and broad and deep conversation about NFTs. So I'm sure we'll be hearing and seeing a lot more of them. Thank you all for coming. Quick reminders, this meetup happens third Monday of every month without fail. Next month is a presentation from IBM on the services they provide to startups. And actually the next one after that in August is going to be about blockchain in healthcare, because we just created a healthcare working group. And also, the next thing that this meetup group will do is on July 1st, we're having a happy hour in South Austin at Cosmic Coffee. And if you want to know all about these things, you go to austinblockchaincollective.com. That way you'll find lots of posts and links to things like our blog, which goes on about all the things happening, our Twitter feed, our LinkedIn group, etc. So that's the place to go visit. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to the presenters, Ron and Courtney. Have a great month ahead. Take care. Cheers.